Okay, we're back for the second part of the video, just a little bit more, and then you guys can watch this cool video about Peru and about the Inca. So the fourth and last civilization is not in Central America like the three previous ones we talked about, but this one's down in South America on the west coast. So this is the mountains of what is now Peru, but it didn't just include modern-day Peru, it also included much of the north and also to the south of Peru. And they overlapped the Aztecs, so both of these groups were in existence at about the same time, and both were conquered by Europeans that came, specifically Spanish conquistadors, which we'll talk about later. Mostly agricultural. Yes, they had the corn, beans, and squash, things like that. But the main crop that absolutely fed their people, other than corn, was potatoes. And these guys had hundreds of different types of potatoes that they would use to feed their people. And they would store them in big potato bins, basically, or potato cellars, similar to what they got here in Idaho. And they would actually squish the potatoes in order to get out a lot of the moisture, so that way they wouldn't rot and they would store longer, and especially at higher altitudes that they lived in, to be able to preserve these potatoes, to be able to use them later on down the road, not only as seed potatoes, but for food as well. And what they would do is, because they lived in the mountains, they would, on a hillside, they would cut steps out of the hillside, and then they would plant their crops on these steps and have multiple levels going up. And you'll see it in the video. It's really, really cool how they did this to make farmland out of what couldn't be farmland, and also allowed them to be able to irrigate effectively, moving water down these steps rather than having it just down a mountainside and rushing through. And so they were quite ingenious in how they were able to do this. Like the Aztecs, they were a military society. They did human sacrifices, but not sacrifices in the way that you would think of with the Aztecs, with like knives and blood and all that stuff. They would oftentimes make mummies. So they would put the sacrifice individuals to sleep with a mixture of drugs that they had to make the heart rate go down and make breathing stop and paralyze the people, and then they would die. And then they would mummify them. And so one of the things that help to mummify is the dry, very, very mountain air, or very dry mountain air and cool temperatures. And they find some pretty significant Incan mummies that still have hair and skin and all sorts of things. Their capital city was Cusco. So if you've ever seen The Emperor's New Groove in Disney, Cusco is not a made-up city. Now, obviously, The Emperor's New Groove is not historically accurate, but the city itself, as far as where it exists, yes. And then another famous city that is a part of the Incan Empire is Machu Picchu. Now, Machu Picchu would not have been a city where a lot of people would have lived in. It would have been a city for a pilgrimage. So it was a religious city where religious ceremonies and things like that would be done, and where you would go at a certain part of the year to celebrate religious festivals, but then you would return home. And so that's what I mean by a pilgrimage. It's a trip for a religious purpose specifically. So these people are really, as far as architecture goes, we're out of this world, leaps and bounds, well above any of the other civilizations that we've talked about. So you can see the what consisted of the entire Incan Empire, all the way up into Colombia and Ecuador, and then there's modern-day Peru and Chile down south. So it's huge, and all up there in the Andes Mountains, and so their cities were quite high up in altitude. In fact, there have been studies about the descendants, the people who still live in areas like Peru, who on average have larger hearts to be able to more effectively pump oxygen through people's bodies, an adaptation that their ancestors developed living in such high altitudes for so long. So So the first one there, top left one, is Cusco, along with the other one to the right, and then also Cusco is the bottom one. Now, if you look at this wall here, that this building, a modern building, is built on the foundations of a wall that was established by the Incas way, way back when, thousands of years ago, or not thousands, over 1,000 years ago. But notice that this is not a stamped concrete. These are actual individual stones that were shaped to fit each other perfectly like puzzle pieces. There are no joints in those walls, meaning that there's no mortar to glue these stones together. They are just exactly stuck together, and obviously are effective because they've been around for over 1,500 years, and modern buildings are being built on them because they're so sturdy. So the question is, how did they do it? There's really no answer. We've never figured. And so, I don't know, maybe you guys can become archaeologists and figure it out someday. So this is a picture of Machu Picchu, this religious city. Some of you might know somebody who's gone there or gone yourself. It's kind of been a bucket list thing for me, but it takes time to get there, and you have to have a license to be able to get there, or a permit to be able to get there. And to get there physically is not easy. They don't just drive up and let people out. There's significant hiking that has to take place to get here. So, all right, so we're done with these notes. I want you to keep these notes. Don't worry about turning these notes in, but there will also be a video now that the sub will get started for you. So make sure you pay attention and don't be annoying to the sub, and don't be annoying to other people that are trying to watch. So we'll see you tomorrow with another lecture.